back to the Torque Test channel. We've been testing die grinders lately, specifically cordless ones, and how they stack up to traditional air tools that they advertise as beating. Last time we tested the M12 die grinders from Milwaukee, which, while probably the closest in size to traditional air grinders, don't compare to 1/3 horsepower air tools that they advertise to beat. At least for us, when trying to extract the most amount of watts or horsepower these tools can muster, putting them closer to 1/4 horsepower tools when we're just comparing apples to apples. Today we add 2 entries that hopefully change things in the horsepower department. Frankly, we set out to purchase 3 or 4, but there's not a lot of options when we're talking cordless in this class. But we bought this Ryobi HP PSB DG01, which retails for $149. It's not the same size as an M12 right angle grinder, but perhaps that's a good thing for making more power. It is 18 volt instead of 12 volts, yet still miles smaller than Milwaukee's latest introduction of an M18 die grinder that they're coming out with, so still very much in this one-handed wielding class of die grinders. And for all that girth, it's a $50 cheaper tool as well. So will that size mean more power? Well, the Ryobi doesn't advertise any power figures, simply that it's up to 2 times more powerful than pneumatic, which we've seen how that's gone before from the same outfit at TTI. And speaking of TTI, since they both make the Milwaukee in this Ryobi, perhaps it's not advertising power levels to not compete with the Milwaukee? We'll see. And when we're talking pneumatic, we've yet to test anything bigger than 1/3 horsepower, so we're certainly going to rope in the help of the comparatively cheap $60 Chief brand from Harbor Freight in their 1/2 horsepower rated CH14 ADG. While 1/3 or 1/4 the price of these other 2 cordless options, it's still 2 to 3 times pricier than other right angle grinders from Harbor Freight. So all of this is going to allow us to do a few things. See if the bigger Ryobi makes bigger power, compare that to a step up in the air tool category as well, and something we've been very curious about, Ryobi's batteries, a complex and convoluted arena of options from the brand that has, at least on one occasion, caused them to call us out when we purchased their high torque impact wrench and didn't use the quote-unquote right battery, which the one they suggested isn't sold with the tool, by the way. They've got standard HP high performance, which is different than HP, and 21700 cell packs that they've made. So we're curious which makes the actual most measurable horsepower with no impact mechanism or hammers losing any of that in translation, just a big brushless motor versus a generator. We want to know, so maybe you do too. Up first, we have the air tool, the Chief 1/2 horsepower right angle die grinder. That's a bit chunkier than a 1/3 horsepower tool, and we'll get docked here in the points for that. It displaces 375 milliliters worth of water, so 375 cc's, and starts off with a -38 for it. Our first go at the dyno here is to see what kind of RPM this tool makes under 130 watts, which is sort of a power level you should expect from most grinders. The Chief makes about 17,000 RPM, similar to the 1/3 horsepower tools, and a little above the M12s with a large battery. Starting off at about 190 watts, which is the most an M12 will make, the air tool is pretty much unfazed here. Barging into the mid-200s, this tool slows obviously, but is still able to easily power through those levels of load. 270, 280 watts, 290, 300, 310, and it's starting to work harder. 320, you can hear it struggle, and you need to lessen the load for the tool to recover RPM again. After repeated testing, we found this tool likes as much as 300 and can take 320 watts in short bursts, so it gets 320 peak here and 300 sustained. This is with high flow fittings, 3/8 line, and 110 psi. But what's that in horsepower? 0.43 horsepower as measured, which with the efficiency of this motor run as a generator at this RPM would be in the neighborhood of just over 1/2 horsepower, but we mainly use this for comparison reasons anyways, like most of the figures on this channel. I feel this very much is a healthy, and dare I say it, good 1/2 horsepower right angle die grinder from Harbor Freight. With a 3-inch disc, you could get it to slow sometimes, but in most situations, not really bogged down. It's pretty powerful. And it feels rather balanced too, no vibrations like we got from the cheaper Harbor Freight grinder. With this range of power in the books, I feel we have what we need to place that Ryobi now. This 1.5 amp hour battery is barely able to do 130 watts. Maybe ours is just old. I can't get myself to buy another one of these at this kind of performance though. I say skip that one. Here's one of their standard bargain 4 amp hour batteries. At 130 watts, it makes 18,100 RPM, which is much better and the most revs we've gotten from any die grinder at this load ever. And with most batteries from here on out, this Ryobi makes similar RPM at this level. Let's see what this 4 amp hour can make. 170, 180, 190 watts, 200, 210, 220, 240 watts, 260 watts, and at 270 and 280 it does dive in RPM but can keep it up from there. 290, 300 watts, and it really digs in and becomes quickly tapped out. So 290 watts or so here. Oddly, we found that the HP battery, the 4 amp hour, also sees similar. At 300 watts, it can do that more capably, but does fall off at that level and is more comfortable when turned down lower. So similar to the standard 4 amp hour. Now for the P195 3 amp hour battery, our favorite choice, and therefore Ryobi is discontinuing it, of course. It's got one row of 21700 cells, picking up where we left off, 290 watts, 300 watts, 310, 320, 330 watts. 340 causes it to dive a bit, and the tool eventually cuts out into protection mode at 330 watts again, and it would do that each time. So 340 in brief peaks and 320 sustained is what it can make. Now for the battery Ryobi suggests in place of that one and says it's better than the 21700 cell 3 amp hour pack, and wrote to us saying as much. The 4 amp hour high performance, this high performance being written out in full here. 280, 310 watts, 320 watts, and we found even after letting it cool off, it didn't like much more than 310 or 320 watts. Who knows why? Maybe it's because this tool doesn't have HP contact pickups. Not sure though, it clearly draws enough power to warrant those pickups, and I feel at $150 it may deserve it too. Even before we clip on a huge 9 amp hour, this tool gets dinged quite a bit for its footprint. This Ryobi required us to buy a new water jug, tipping the volume scales at 1100 cc's for the compact 3 amp hour and 1200 for the 4 amp hour high performance, almost 1225 on that one. Which means, yeah, it's big in comparison to all of these. Now the 9 amp hour, that's also big and powerful, yes, but it just causes this tool in particular to enter into protection mode quicker than any other battery. 330 watts is as much as any battery is going to deliver with this tool. But that's pretty dang good. 340 watt peak, 320 watt sustained is as much as 0.46 horsepower, beating out what we felt to be a very beefy air tool in that Chief. We could not get this tool to enter into protection mode while just using it as a grinder, and very rarely would it slow down until you used a battery that wasn't fully charged, which is my main complaint with the Milwaukee tools. They enter into protection mode all the time, so this sort of solves that most of the time. Now let's see what that looks like in the points. The Chief gets a 752 with its smaller size and price, and the Ryobi gets a 731 with a 3 amp hour battery and 680 with a 4 amp hour high performance. Putting the Chief in first, but being way closer than we thought with this kind of hamstring over here. Certainly the best one-handed cordless die grinder we've tested, and considering there aren't a bunch of these out there, maybe that exists. And the lowest price one on the market as well. Considering Ryobi's sometimes awkward battery shape, fully on display here, it makes you wonder what a brand like DeWalt could do with a 20 volt die grinder this size, but with a power stack. Until that day or something similar, the Chief is pretty good if you need more air power, and the Ryobi is looking like a dominant force with this non-two-handed battle axe size of automotive die grinders that we find most handy. Appreciate you joining us. We make episodes like this at least every Friday. Click subscribe if that's up your alley, and thanks for watching.